you chanted at the same time as a forever. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I do. Yeah, moving on, yeah, it's nice to see you again, Manuel. Hope to get out here a little more often, yeah. Who's giving the talk today?
And as Maharaj from Shepherds.
Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Swami Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to Shri Shri Guru Gauranga. So it's a great pleasure to welcome today, all the way from the UK, and joined this movement in 1982, which is 43 years ago. A very auspicious year. And took the title was offered the title of sannyas back in 2011, and has since been traveling all over the UK, also in Russia, in Georgia, various other places, and okay, so that's I'm going to introduce Dayananda Maharaj ki Jai.
Anybody new today?
이게 대왕 가지고 있던
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo
वर्टी क्यों रखते हैं? इसको वर्टी में रखना तो ऊपर की पिक्चर भी है। वर्टी इसको वर्टी क्यों रखते हैं? ऊपर की पिक्चर भी है। पीछे का फिर नहीं आ पाएगा। मजे भी उसका
Okay, so this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's Lord Ramar's prayers instead of translating. So glorifying the attributes of the Supreme Lord. He's wanting to get the Shakti to be able to create everything. So first he's following etiquette of, we've got Mangala Charanam, we call it, right? Mangala means auspicious. Mangala Charanam. We glorify, pay respects to a senior, which is Krishna, and you offer them a benediction, and then you ask for the ability to perform the service. Right? From Bhakti Yoga Parabhavita Vitsaroja Ase Shrutek Sitapati Nanuvar Narta Pumsham Yad Yad Diyata Urgaya Vibhavayanti Tad Tad Bahu Pranaya Se Sadanugrahaya. Translation. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. You can repeat that. Okay. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears
can see you
by the process of bona fide hearing,
process of bona fide hearing,
and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees.
You are so much merciful to your
that you
devotees.
manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence
yourself in the particular form of transcendence
in which they have always thought of you.
in which they have always thought of you.
The thought, when you find this, see Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The statement here that the Lord manifests himself before the devotee in the form in which the devotee likes to worship him indicates that the Lord becomes subordinate to the desires of the devotee. So much so that he manifests his particular form as the devotee demands. This demand of the devotee is satisfied by the Lord because he is pliable in terms of the transcendental loving service of the devotee. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.11. Yeyitamam prapadyante tam sataiva vijamyaham. We should note, however, that the Lord is never the order supplier of the devotee. Here in this verse it is particularly mentioned from Bhakti Yoga Parabhavita. This indicates the efficiency achieved through execution of matured devotional service or prema, love of God. This state of prema is achieved by the gradual process of development from faith to love. On faith, one associates with bona fide devotees, and by such association one gets, or one can become, engaged in bona fide devotional service, which includes proper initiation and the execution of the primary devotional duties prescribed in the revealed scriptures. This is clearly indicated in by the word Shrutekshita. The Shrutekshita path is to hear from bona fide devotees who are conversant with the Vedic wisdom, free from mundane sentiments. By this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rights, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord, as described in the Vedas. This attachment of the devotee to a particular form of the Lord is due to natural inclination. Each and every living entity is originally attached to a particular type of transcendental service, because he is eternally the servant or servitor of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya says that the living entity is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Therefore, every living entity has a particular type of service relationship with the Lord eternally. This particular attachment is involved by practice of regulated devotional service to the Lord, and thus the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one who is already eternally attached. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called Swarup Siddhi. The Lord sits on the lotus heart of the devotee in the eternal form the pure devotee desires, and thus the Lord does not part from the devotee. As confirmed in the previous verse, the Lord, however, does not disclose himself to casual or unauthentic worshippers to be exploited. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7.25. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samamritaha. Rather, by yogamaya, the Lord remains concealed to the non-devotees or casual devotees who are serving their sense gratification. The Lord is never visible to the pseudo-devotees who worship the demigods in charge of universal affairs. The conclusion is that the Lord cannot become the order supplier of a pseudo-devotee, but he is always prepared to respond to the desires of a pure, unconditional devotee who is free from all tinges of material infection. Om Ganti Nirandasya Ganandana Chakshurundatam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Astasya Dishitarine.
कुछ सेवा करो, कुछ सेवा.
So it says in a previous verse, casual devotee. When we're casual, we'll get distracted very easily. We won't be able to focus so easily. And it's not talking about most devotees actually. Every devotee wants to make spiritual progress, but there's something holding them back. And we spoke a little bit about this morning. And so we can mistake. It's in the it says 4:11 here, but the verse before that in Bhagavad Gita is 4:10, and it explains the obstacles that a devotee may face, or somebody who's aspiring to perform devotional service. So then it's not casual. Casual means we don't really take it so seriously. It's something, we can take or leave, right? sometimes we like to be inspired, and sometimes we're not, but we're not really, it's not really bothered us. We like a bit of both, like both. This is casual. But also, you know, in the Chaitanya Shiksha by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains that, you know, Krishna can reveal himself to his devotees straight away. Why? But he says he doesn't, because he's like a kind father. You know, a kind father, he makes his son become qualified for something, doesn't he? And then what happens if we have to strive for something? What happens? We actually value it, don't we? If the thing comes easy, we don't value it. And this is how we spoil a son by just giving him what he wants. Then he's never satisfied. So Krishna doesn't want that to happen. He wants us to strive. And it may be that, you know, we're finding obstacles, and this is not casual. It means that we're trying, but there's things that we just cannot get over. Has anybody had that experience? It's like we you know, we've got the desire. Maybe the desire is not strong enough, but Krishna sees that desire, and one of the things that happens is that, you know, we may make some advancement. Yeah, we make some advancement. We're feeling inspired. Then all of a sudden, something from the past comes up, right, and infiltrates our consciousness. Yeah? We thought we left it behind, right? But it's there, tapping us on the shoulder. Remember me? And so, did I tell you about Charlie Chaplin? Well, I was once at an airport. It was in the middle, Baku in Azerbaijan, and in their departure zone, they had big screens, you know, maybe 4 or 5 foot by 3 foot. And on these screens, they used to play, you know, videos. And it was late at night, it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning. I eventually made it to the departure lounge, and then I sat down, and there was this film, and it was a Charlie Chaplin film. And I was thinking, you know, I shouldn't watch this. You know, it's just mine. I'm not going to get, you know, my conscience is not going to be much after I've watched the film. So I got the Bhagavad Gita out and started reading it. And then I was off and I go. Start looking at the film, you know, then open it. And then I was thinking, I thought, well, you know, Prabhupada used to watch by Charlie Chaplin. It says that in the Lamrita, doesn't it? Yeah. And you get also realization from it. I thought, you know, Parampara, I can watch it. And so, you know, I started watching it, and it's all silent movie, so it's difficult to, but you know, Charlie Chaplin was such a good animated actor that he could actually portray what he was meaning. And he's walking down the street, he had his bowler hats on and tails, you know, and all of a sudden from after this boy, it must have been either Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, because everybody were, you know, having a festive time. And after this, all of a sudden, this person in tails, you know, immaculately dressed, he come rolling onto this bar, and he knocked into Charlie Chaplin and knocked him on the floor. And so this person got up, and you know, he was completely blocked over. He'd been on the, and he starts, you know, brushing Charlie Chaplin's hands and apologising. And he said, anyway, come on the town with me. And Charlie Chaplin pulls his pockets out. I didn't put any money. He said, no problem. It's on me. So then they start going to different bars and showing the different escapades. And by the end of the night, you know, they were both blocked up. And so then they go in this person's car, it was a Rolls Royce. And they started there, you know, and it's like, I don't know how they got on, but anyway, they eventually got back. And, you know, he said, you can sleep in that room, I'll sleep here. So Charlie Chaplin takes rest. And by this time, you know, this person's took him to one of the top tailors and he's got a really good outfit. He really looks the part. And so, you know, next morning he wakes up and the other, you know, the owner, the multi-millionaire, he's asleep. And so the butler comes in. And the butler, you know, is like, he doesn't like this newcomer, but Charlie Chaplin says, you know, I've got an errand to do today. And then he asks the butler, he says, can I use the car? And the butler reluctantly goes to the owner and says, I'll give it to him, you know, and he goes back to sleep. So he gives him the keys and he's like, sets up down the road, and everybody's watching this. Wow, look at that. What a top. Does anybody know what a top is? A top's a real gentleman, isn't it? You know. And so he's looking like the real top, he's looking the real part. He's got the gear, he's got the car, and he's like really enjoying this, you know. And then he tries after a while, this person is walking down the pavement. Remember, this was in the 1920s or before that, when it was the Depression, right? And so this person's smoking a cigarette. And he looks at it and he throws it down. And it's only half smoked. So Charlie Chaplin sees this and he jumps after the Rolls Royce, goes running towards his cigarette. And just as he gets it, there's another down out on the street and he's just going to pick it up. So he kicks him out of the way and he picks up his cigarette and he starts walking off. And this guy who's been kicked out of his looking at him. What's going on? Just look at him, he's got a tuxedo on, he's got a Rolls Royce, and he's stolen, you know, a fag end on me. What do you think? Does it ring a bell? Yeah, and this was, you know, he looked the part, and then all the gear, but all of a sudden he did some, you know, something came from his past, and he had to act. So we do that sometimes, don't we, in a devotional service. So these are things which, you know, get in the way. So it says, Vita Raja Bhaya Krodha in the Bhagavad Gita, verse 10. Vita means freedom, and Raja means attachment. Vita Raja Bhaya means fear. Krodha means anger. He says these are things which are actually stopping us from, you know, making advancement. And it even prevents people from practicing devotional service. Because we have you know, misconceptions what actually devotional service is. And therefore we tend to remain attached. If we were too attached, then we can't, you know, we become diverted by that. You can't focus on two things at once very easily. And that's a problem. How do we get rid of that attachment? What's the answer? What's the best way? You know, Charlie Chaplin, he got association, didn't he? It's association, isn't it? We become like, immediately he became like, did I tell you about, no, better not. We'll come to that later. Go on then. Did I tell the story of Al Capone? No. Not yet. Sure. You like to tell a story? Well, that was at the same time, wasn't it? Within the 20s, the roaring 20s, they called it. And, you know, there was prohibition. Remember the prohibition? They prohibited alcohol. And what happens when you just stop something, then, you know, people are going to get it by hook or by crook. So that's why good governments, they they license it, don't they? Okay, these houses here you can actually drink and like that. But the Americans, they actually stopped it altogether, so what we call bootleg booze or bootleg whiskey. And so that means the mafia and the gangs, they used to make their own porcine, they used to make their own, own drink and sell it on the black market. And so, they were like organised crime. And anybody who didn't buy it, they used to, mess the shop up. And so there were also a protection racket. And Al Capone was one of the main men. And so, he was causing havoc. Were Al Capone a good criminal? What do you think? Who thinks he was a good criminal?
Yeah, I
Yeah. Anybody agree with that? Can you ever get criminal? Eh? He didn't. You know what happened? What happened is that he got caught a few times, and he had an expert lawyer who was very good at finding loopholes in the law. And so each time they tried to nail him, he used to get him off the charge. And so you can imagine how well looked after he were by Al Capone. He had a mansion, he had a family, he had 2 or 3 cars, and he had a young family as well. But he had a bit of a conscience. And he was thinking, I keep getting this criminal off there. But it's just like making everybody's life a misery. And then he thought, what will my children grow up to be? If they see I'm not him like this, they're going to become the same. And so he was thinking, and then he came to the conclusion, it's best if I to turn him in. And that's when he, like you were saying, and so at an opportune moment he gave evidence against Al Capone. Is that a healthy thing to do? What do you think? It's not, is it? Because Al Capone's got, just like in that film, Maha and Nashringa, was it? As soon as he tried to kill Nashringa, all his friends came to help him. So that's what happened, is that he went to jail, Alcatraz, but sometime later they shot Easy Eddie, shot him dead. And this was in Chicago. Well, that was the main hub of the bootleg whiskey racket protection. And so, about maybe, when did the Second World War started in 1939, so the Americans, they came into it in 1942, didn't they? 1942. And what happened is the Japanese, they attacked Pearl Harbor and sunk most of the battleships, so they put them back. And so eventually, the Americans, they built up the Navy again and used to fight the Japanese in the South Pacific, and around the, what do you call it, Far East Asia. And they used to fight from aircraft carriers. And so, on one particular raid, all the aeroplanes were there and vroom, vroom, they're setting off. We were going to attack a Japanese station. And so, after there being fighting a little bit, one of the pilots, he noticed that his fuel gauge was like, then he went to empty, and he was thinking, what do I do here, And what would you do in that situation? What would you do? He approached his authority. He got him on the board. He said, best thing to do is turn back, get it checked out, otherwise you might lose the pilot and the plane. So he set up like the phone. So some way by that time, and on his way back he saw some other aeroplanes going towards the fleet. No, guess what they were? The Japanese had, they've got some spies and they found out they were going to be unprotected, so they were flying towards the aircraft carrier. And so he was in a conundrum, is what they call it. He didn't know, he doesn't know how much fuel he's got, he might not even, and there's probably about 9 bombers. So what should he do? And so he decided to actually try and put them off. And being a fighter, a fighter one, he could fly behind them and he shot a couple down. And then he started flying between them and they couldn't actually, they couldn't get him because they just shot their own planes down. So at one point they just actually turned back, they aborted the raid. How do we know that was true? Because they were all watching on the aircraft carrier. And when he landed, they actually gave him the highest medal, highest decoration that's possible for bravery. And then later on, he actually got shot down and killed later on in the war. But they called him Butch O'Hare. Yeah. And so they named the Chicago airport. They call it O'Hare Airport. They named it after him. So, the point is that there's 2 parts to this story, isn't there? So what's the connection with these two stories?
You've got to make your own decision.
Eh?
You make your own decision. You come to a point where you have to make the decision yourself, which is what we call the conscience.
Yeah, but why did he make that decision? That's
You sacrifice.
Sacrifice, yeah, but there's a reason why he sacrificed as well.
He doesn't care.
Eh?
He doesn't care about death.
I'm not very good. Yeah.
Sorry, he doesn't care about death. Neither of them cared about death. They knew they were facing death, and they didn't care about it.
Okay, he couldn't care about death.
Yeah. Not that he couldn't, he didn't.
He didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Any others? Who gives in? He said, so I'll tell you. Butch O'Hare was Easy Eddie's son.
Who's son?
Butch O'Hare, the pilot, was Easy Eddie's son, the lawyer who got Alpha 4 put in jail. Okay. So, he did the right thing. He actually turned in Alpha 4 and his son followed his example. So, association has that effect that I said the other day, didn't I? We don't know how many people we're affecting when we're devotees. It's not. I was just walking down here, and this girl came up to me. I think she'd had a tipple or two, a joint or two. But she came up and said, "Why do you dress like that?" I said, "Why not?" And then she said, "Are you a cult?" I said, "What's a cult?" "They believe in the devil." I said, "Oh no, I'm not a cult." I said, "Look, who do you believe in?" We believe in God." "What kind of God?" "Krishna." She says, "Who's your?" I said, "Who's your God?" She said, "Jesus." I said, "Very good." I said, "Look, if you want to find out more, just go, you see that red sign over down there?" I said, "There's a go into the restaurant. If you go up to the top, they'll be talking about, in 15 minutes they'll be in class." So, if I'd have been walking down in plain clothes, no tilak on, she wouldn't have cared less. But she don't put it on. So, just by being devotees, we just saw on preaching. By association, it's so powerful. You see a role model, and you think, well, if he can do it, I can do it. There's one devotee in Ireland, I'm not mentioning his name, he does food for life. And, not you. And when he joined, it was like in 1980, something like that. And he used to visit the temple, and then he visited anyway, we were visiting a temple, and we were all working in the garden. He had made friends with another person who was visiting. And then this person who we made friends with used to visit at the same time. He actually joined the ashram. And he thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And he joined the ashram because he joined, that's all. It was like a bit of false ego over there, you know what I mean? It's that simple when we have good association. It's so easy. And so, you know, we should make sure that that's the main thing, that we get regular association. So we've got one out of the three now. We've got raga, how to overcome attachment. What's the next one? Attachment, fear. So, where does fear come from? Comes from the belly button, right? You can feel it coming up. That's anger, that one, isn't it? Anger starts around here, they say. So as soon as you feel the anger brewing, then that's when you switch off. But we're dealing with fear. But fear comes from what? It comes from thinking with the body. As soon as we think with this body, then, you know, we'll be fearful. We have to maintain it. Will we keep us job? Will we keep us livelihood? We have to protect it from so many aggressors. What else? What else can we fear? Fear is, you know, so many things we can be fearful of. Well, any answers?
Fear of death.
Fear of death? Any others? Come on, you all know, you're all intelligent. You're just not reciprocating, that doesn't matter.
Fear of uncertainty.
Eh?
Fear of uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen the next minute, do we?
Fear of failure.
Failure. Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? Sometimes people don't attempt something, you think, if I fail, I'll look a right idiot, you know? Or I'll let people down, and so therefore, you know, dishonour. Dishonour is worse than death, isn't it? For an honourable person. Any more?
Not completing 16 rounds.
Fear of completing 16 rounds, and fear of 16 rounds as well. You know, when we're working as way up, 16 rounds, too risky. You know, all the attachments will go away. We're so tight that we know that if we chant 16, I'll just keep it at 8 and keep a few attachments hanging. I know somebody who will hide that, actually. Yes, so as soon as we identify with the body, then we'll be careful. Dviti, they call it duality. Dviti abhinivasat. What's the answer? He says that Tanmaya Abhitecham. We take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and follows the instruction, we can be elevated to the spiritual platform. I know some people, it's like when we're distributing books. Has anybody been distributing books? Yeah? It's not easy, is it? I thought, yeah, they're more frightened than us. If somebody stops, and sometimes you get somebody to stop and they start asking questions, say, what's this all about? And I said, well, you know, it says knowledge of the soul. Oh, what's the soul? Tell them what the soul is, the difference between the body and the soul. And then eventually, well, what happens then at death, you know, the soul, where does it go? You get another body, you go, oh, no. Has anybody had that one? Not another one. And the point is that they perceive that, you know, spiritual life is going to be like this one. We only know this life. So we may be fearful Because if we're honest, we superimpose what we're experiencing now and what we read in the Bhagavatam in a way that it's you know, you see devotees go through so many difficulties, like Prahlad Maharaj. I was mentioning this morning, he put into so many difficulties, and you know, he said he was in bliss. We can't understand that. And so, you know, devotional service is a gradual development of faith. And where does faith come from? Where does faith come from?
Association.
Eh?
Association. Association.
It comes from association, that's one.
Grace. Grace. Grace of God.
Grace, mercy of God.
Mercy of God, Kripa Shakti. We don't get that very often straight away though, we have to work for it. You know what I mean? Faith, it comes from, it can come from following Varnashram Dharma, indirectly. It can come from, you know, performing pious activities. But usually it comes from association, from a bhakta. If we meet a bhakta who's got faith, if he's enthusiastic, we'll get a little bit of faith. Yeah? Somebody said the other day, didn't they, that a devotee's demeanour can have so much effect on people. You know, in difficult situations, devotees tend to not frustrated, and they recognise that, and they get a little bit of faith. So fear, we've dealt with fear, and fear of advancement. Like I said this the other day, back to Dayananda said if we stay at one level, this is not good. We may stay at one level in the comfort zone, because there may be some trepidation about the next step. Many devotees have expressed that. What's going on? What can I expect? You know, you read the Bhagavatam, I'm not sure about that. I might finish up as Vritrasura or something like that. And what's the last one?
Growth.
Krodha. Anger, that comes from unfulfilled desires or unmet expectations, yeah? When we have an expectation or a desire and it's not fulfilled, then we become agitated. And so that I know that when I first came to the movement, before I came to the movement, I used to, you know, at school I was actually interested in religion to some degree, a little bit God-fearing. And so I used to take an interest, but I could see that actually there's nobody really following this. You know, the standards that it's set in the Bible, I can't see an example. And then when I used to ask questions, I also get like duff answers, you know. There was one prophet in the Bible, he lived for about 1,200 years. We call him Methuselah, you heard Methuselah. I thought, how can somebody live for 1,200 years? And so I asked, she said, what did he say? And I said, he said, they did. No way, you know, he just believed it. So I thought, okay. Then this student teacher came, you know, he was standing in for him when he was getting trained up to teach. And I asked him, he said, oh, their ears were shorter than ours. And no way I thought about it, no. If I'm going to get answers like that, then, you know, this is not the way for me. And I just lost faith. And I started getting into all the wrong things. And then the faith disappeared. So by wrong association, we can lose faith. But yeah, and I became miffed. You know what miffed means? I became a little bit angry. That, you know, there's none, you know, I used to go in the pub and, you know, there'd be somebody spouting up about something on his, and he'd say, oh, I really shut up, you know. I became really disturbed. And then many years later, it actually pushed me towards atheism. I started thinking about Buddhism. Somebody told me in Buddhism there's no God. I thought, that's great. and you can do what you want. And so I was walking down the street, and I saw these books, a row of books on the side. And so I was looking at these books, and it said a person, a monk would go a bald head on. It showed his shoulders and his head. Yeah. And bodies. So I went over and I'm looking at this book, and the top on my shoulder. This person, like ordinary came, so he says, "So how much are these books?" He said, "Give a donation." I said, "No, how much?" He said, "Give a donation." I said, "Oh, I don't know how much to give." So I gave him a donation. And I was walking away, and then he shouted me back, and he gave me a record. And then I was walking away again, and he shouted me again, "What's he want this time?" And he said, "Hare Krishna." And I was really disappointed. So I could remember seeing him on the television, many years ago. I said, "Oh, crazy, You'll never get me doing that." And so I lost it because I wasn't getting the proper association, proper understanding. So when people come to this temple, new people, you don't know what they've been through. You don't know. And so it's to be very, very careful, very patient. We need nurturing. And we expect that from Krishna, don't we? So we should treat others like that also. So this is the so devotional service starts with associating and serving devotees. Sushprasho Shradadhanasa Vasudeva Kataruchi Shammahat Sevyavika Punyatirthan Sherana. It says, by serving those devotees who are free from all vice, great service is done. And by that service, we get affinity for hearing about Krishna. We get an affinity to hear. So we're all serving Srila Prabhupada. We're very fortunate. He set up everything. All we have to do is follow his serving this movement, and we naturally start to get a taste. And from that taste, Srimvatam Svakata Krishna. Punya Shravana Kirtana. It's very, very pious activity. Vridanto Stohe Bhadrani. All Abhadrani, all the things which are preventing us from going forward, they're actually cleansed away. And it says in the purport, Prabhupada actually says, this, if we just carry on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, he says we'll transcend the attraction of sex life, which is the biggest obstacle in this world. And then what we have to hear regularly. And the things are cleansed if we hear regularly. Not all, there's a little bit left. A little bit left. And that's because we have a material body. We have to function in this world. But Tadaraja Tamabhava, Raja Tamas, Raja Passion, Tamas. These are ignorance, these things are actually cleansed away, and we're left with Sattva, which starts to function on the mode of goodness, mode of material goodness. And when we start to perform devotional service on that platform, then eventually it becomes purified, it becomes Shuddha Sattva. And then on that platform we are actually enlivened at every moment. In Bhagavad Gita it says that, doesn't it? Right at the end it says, but by hearing these topics about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I'm feeling a joy at every moment. And Prabhupada says in the purport, not just occasionally, at every moment. Everything's blissful all the time. So, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for that higher taste. So this attachment, fear and anger, These are the obstacles. And then the last verse says, Vidyate Hridaya Granti. Granti means not. Vidyate means cut. You know, false ego is cut just by hearing Bhagavatam. And it's dissolved. I mentioned this the other day, didn't I? We can't perceive how it's happening, but we can feel how it's happening. Sometimes we can't even feel how it's happening, it's so subtle. It's just like when you know, then all of a sudden, make a big progress all at once. So why are we talking like this? Because we all need to understand, you know, how easy this process and how much we've been helped by Krishna, how much we've got everything we need. We don't need anything else. We've got Prabhupada's books, we've got Association of Devotees, we've got Prasadam, we've got the Holy Name. We just utilise those things in a patient way, progressive, but be patient. And gradually we'll advance and we'll come to, Prabhupada said in one lifetime if we're serious. That takes some believing, one lifetime. He says, but if we're serious, it can be one lifetime. We don't have to wait. I was listening to, I've got another story here. It was, it's not a story, it's a true thing. Well, the others are true, but it's actually in devotional service. Used to be one devotee, very powerful preacher. We call him Krishna Swami. Everybody's heard that name, right?
Yes.
And he left this world in 2001 or 2002 maybe. And then in Mayapur, because he was going from Mayapur to Calcutta to catch his plane, and one devotee used to serve him pretty regularly. He was with him when he was packing his bags, and he kept saying, "Where are you going, Maharaj?" He said, "I'm going home." He said, "No, where are you going?" He said, "I'm going home." And he kept saying that, and you know, this devotee, well, I was a bit puzzled. Well, you know, he usually tells me that he's going, he keeps saying he's going, what's he talking about? And then what happened is, on his way to the airport, the car crashed and he was killed. So he knew what was going to happen some way or other. But then after that, every year in Mayapur, on the day that they left the body, as a, you know, not celebrating, but glorifying Krishna, they used to put an audio tape on for class. And that day they had it on, I was in Mayapur, and I was a little bit late, you know, and I eventually got in the temple and this class were on it, and it must have been question time, because he said, he says, "Why are you thinking like that? Why are you thinking like that?" He said it a few times. "Don't think like that." I thought, think like what, you know, I missed the, and then he kept on, he kept saying the same thing. He says, "Do you think, after performing devotional service for this lifetime, do you think after, you know, distributing books and preaching and, you know, being a serious devotee, do you think that, you know, our acharyas are so ungrateful, that Srila Prabhupada is so ungrateful, that Krishna is so ungrateful that he won't go back to Godhead?" He said, "Don't think like that." So this is actually Shastri, you know. He says Krishna can give us, he can appear straight away, but he won't. Even if we're a serious devotee, he'll make us actually become completely purified, and then we'll really value the devotional service. It's clearing up the Bhava road. If we leave some material disease there, what happens if you don't get rid of the disease completely? What happens? It comes back. So, go on.
I had a little interaction with Tam and Krishna Raj, and just saying about how you He wasn't honest, he wasn't an ordinary personality.
Well, I don't know whether he did or not, but it appeared like that.
Yeah, I would say that he probably did know, because weird things would happen around him. So, so a friend of mine was distributing loads of books to get noticed by Tamil Krishna Maharaj, and this was in the Surrey Street Temple. And him, pat the books, count the Lakshmi, and he said, "I want to get noticed by Tamil Krishna Maharaj." And I was thinking, he's not going to notice me, because I was, or whatever. Anyway, so then they read out the stalls, and Dharma said to him, "Who is Dharma said to?" Because he came top, he distributed 80 big books on Oxford Street, which is no mean feat. And he said, "Who is Dharma?" And he said, "Me." And then I thought, "Oh, he's got noticed," and that was it. I'm doing nothing about that. I thought, okay, he's got noticed, did the job, very good. And then in the afternoon, some Christian outside the restaurant talking to a group of people, and I was walking towards him, he had his back to me, right? And all of a sudden he turned around and stared at me straight in the eyes. And then he turned around again and began talking to the group, and I thought, oh, he's noticed me.
Yeah.
It was a transcendental thing. Then his book served to the servants, because I was serving, a devotee was serving. Sort of thing. So it was a transcendental sort of thing. It wasn't a freak acting or anything like that. So that's all I'm saying is that he wasn't an ordinary personality. Okay, Krishna. From my interaction, anyway, it's very Krishna.
Yeah, Krishna won't let us relax, that's the point. He's not going to let his devotee relax. It's too risky. So, we find that Shastra sometimes think, oh, this is too heavy, We feel that, we feel a little bit, sometimes we might feel a little bit, what's the word? Unenthusiastic. What's the opposite of enthusiastic? Unenthusiastic, right? And so, but that's to get to it's like making us grave. This is not a mean task. But and then we don't become complacent. But then we get encouraged by things like I just mentioned, and the Shastra says, and Prabhupada said many times we can go back to God in one lifetime. And he means it. But the point is, if that's all that we heard, we would take it too lightly. And so to keep us focused, we have to hear about, we have to work at it. And but Krishna's actually filling in the gaps. We make one step towards Krishna, he makes 10 steps towards Krishna. Okay, so we can stop there. Is there anybody got any questions or feedback?
Question? In corporate he talks about prescribed devotional activities. What are they?
About devotional activities? What are they?
Yeah, prescribed them from the scriptures.
Well, the devotional activity is something which is done for anything we do, which is sanctioned in Shastra and authorized by the acharyas, is called, Vaidhi Bhakti. This is devotional service. It has to be something which is sanctioned by Shastra and also backed up by all the authorities who are following Shastra. So, and then that activity becomes a devotional activity. So this is the beginning of devotion. It may be, with the body, the mind may not be, and the heart may not be into it, but we do it, in a mechanical way. But it's classed as devotional service. But if somebody serves you in a mechanical way, you may appreciate it to some degree, but it's not really going to really affect you, you know what I mean? You're going to feel, okay, it's not really coming from the person. And then I mentioned this the other day, that the devotion can become more internalized. As we become purified, the natural devotion in the heart will start to come out. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Satya Kavanai, Shravanadi Sudha Chatikare Odai. Pure God is in the heart, the seed of pure devotional service, the bija. And it's ignited by association with those who've got bhakti. And then that starts to manifest, grow. And that's all. It's not just something we have to obtain. And it's actually initiated by a certain process. Just like a child. A child has got the ability to walk even when he's laid in the cot. It's innate. And if he's actually trained in the proper way, he can walk fairly easily, right? And so that's the process that we're going through. We're following a process of rules and regulations. We learn how to walk in devotional service. So it's considered devotional service. And if we follow our representative, Krishna's representative, the spiritual master, and the authorities in the line, then we consider to be on the platform of pure devotional service. But internally we're not pure yet. But it will actually manifest in due course. Well, and then it's not a matter of making an effort, it's natural, it's spontaneous. And Prabhupada gives the example, it's just like the spontaneous attraction between male and female. It's not something you have to actually practice, it's there. So that's what our relationship with Krishna is like. It's just blocked and by so many misconceptions. And we are hanging on to them. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? I've got what I've got, I don't know what I'm going to get if I let go of this. But then we see other people letting go, we start to feel that way as well.
So do it in the mode.
Just got one. You have to speak up.
Do it in the mood then. What are you saying?
In the proper mode. Yeah, we're practicing doing a little bit extra. Like that,
Just in the story that you were about your own life, you were stopped on the street and you got the book. But you had been kind of a little atheistic before that, and you kind of went away from any belief because you were a little bit, you just weren't happy with what you were hearing. What actually changed for yourself? What was it that made that difference?
well, it was gradual and I couldn't understand it at the time, and it's the same with everybody. Brahmanda Brahmate Bhagavanji. So the question was, when I started to practice, what was the one thing that really convinced me to do it? And when I look back in hindsight, and I think everybody can actually have the same experience, is that I could see it was a combination and a sequence of things that happened. And in the Shastra it says Brahmanda Brahmate Bhagavanji Guru Krishna Prasadipaya Bhakti Latavi. He says that, the living entities being wandering in this material world from the higher planets to the lower planets, from one species to another. And then by good fortune, he gets the seed of devotional service by the mercy of Krishna. So Krishna's in the heart for that purpose, he's Paramatma, and he is witnessing our activities. And when we start to become a little bit, we start to waver in the material ending, and we start asking questions, he'll direct us to the answers to those questions, whatever they are. And as they become more and more centered around spiritual activity, he sends us information from one way or another, through a book, through a devotee, through an experience. So I could see that, actually, I've said this before, that my initial signing of the Hare Krishnas was in 1969, when they first came to England. They came in 68, and 69, yeah. They had the first, or it might have been 70 actually, they had the first Rath Yatra in London. And I was in the back room and they had me, I said, come and have a look at this. So I went in, and I was amazed at what I saw these bald-headed monks, you know, in the gear, dancing away in front of this huge cart. And it was on the 6 o'clock news. I said, where do they come from? He said, they come from India. He says, they're white. So, anyway, we were discussing it. He said, anyway, wherever they come from, he said, this is real religion. I said, how do you know? He says, everybody's happy. So somehow or other, you know, he could understand what religion was, you know. And then I saw him on top of the pops. Anybody remember top of the pops? No? You do. It used to be, you know, yeah. Yeah, it used, I don't know how many years, it must be 20 years ago since I finished. And they used to have the, you know, used to have the, you know, the top, used to play the top records, which would come into the charts, the Beatles, the Rolling Stone, and what, you know, Linkin Choir and all these and then, you know, I was listening to it, and then say, and in at number 10 is the Radha Krishna temple with the Hare Krishna mantra, and then it's da 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 da, you know, it started playing the Hare Krishna mantra. I thought, what's this? Then I remember, oh, I know, I saw them just about 6 months ago, and they had Pan's people, you know, Pan's people, they were like Matajis, you know, dressed in the 4 directions nearly, you know. And but this time they'd all got saris on, and they were dancing to the Hare Krishna mantra. So that was the second effect, and I started chanting along with them, you know. I was actually mocking them. I thought, who's this Hare Krishna anyway? And then, but after that, I couldn't understand at the time. I lost the taste for eating meat. I was eating meat, and I just thought, I don't really want to eat it. And I can't understand what we're happening, you know. But I've been purified. And then years later, I was walking around the street in a hometown. That's when I saw the books. So then when I didn't read the book because I was so disgusted with it, you know, not being able to get answers to the questions, that as soon as it mentioned God in it, I just closed it up and I put it on the shelf. And then it must have been like 6 or 7 years later that I was so, you know, disgusted with material life as well that, you know, usually I used to go out and go for a drink or something on Sunday. I thought, I don't even want to do that. And then I saw this book. I said, well, I don't know what to do, which is going to be the biggest tapasya, read that book, I'll go out. And so I picked the book up and I started reading it, and that was it. You know, I've been primed. And when I read it at the same time, everything fell into place. It was a bittersweet experience, you know. Reincarnation, reincarnation. Karma, I was really into it. Then Krishna. and then it said, foray the principle. But then, you know, I think I got a taste. Maybe there's some way around this, I'll pick it up again. So that's what it's like, it's bittersweet, isn't it? Devotional service, you have to actually do the needful. But the result you get from it is far exceeds the tapasya you put into it. That's it. Yeah.
I have a question. So, did you ever physically met His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada? And if yes, how was it like to be in his physical presence?
I didn't meet him.
No. Okay.
No, I thought he was still alive. I thought he was still And then one day I visited an ISKCON centre. I've been practicing for about 6 months. And I visited an ISKCON centre and they put a video on your ever well-wisher. And then I realised he wasn't around anymore. I missed him by a few years. But actually, when I was reading the Science of Self-Realisation, and I got the feeling, I thought, oh, who wrote this book? It's just so clear. And I was thinking to myself, whoever wrote this, they're actually a real friend. I was thinking like that, and then I forgot about it. Then when I saw this Your Ever Well-Wisher, and I thought, that's it. Krishna calls everybody that Ever Well-Wisher. And he's speaking to everybody like that through his books. And so when we go out there and we give somebody a book, it's a big milestone in their life. They're never going to be the same. We can let them get on with what they're doing, and they're not going to make any spiritual progress, they're going to regress, or we can help them. Is it worth it? It's worth it, isn't it? Just going out there and trying, let Krishna do the rest. And that girl on there, she's got a seed there. It may seem like she's forgot, I'm not bothered with it. But there's a seed planted, I think Krishna, we call her Krishna. So she thought, I was a demon. But now she don't think of me. Well, I hope she doesn't anyway. Now she understands that we worship Krishna, we worship God. So she'll make another step in due course. And it's the same for us. But how long is it going to take? Are we going to, dawdle? Are we going to be dragged back to God, or are we going to go back willingly? Anything else?
Thank you for the class. When we raise the money, would you make this a biannual trip?
When we
raise the money, will you make this a biannual trip?
Biannual? Well, thank you. I'll try. I'll be away for about 5 months. I'll be here. Yeah, they're very, people in Ireland are very receptive to spiritual life. Very soft-hearted. Okay, Gantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Lord of Prema. Jai.
अरे जहाँ मेहनत कर उनको क्वेश्चन करना है चले जाएंगे पब्लिक में तेरे हाथ में क्या है मजाक दो
End of the lecture, I asked 2 questions, and the winner of each of the questions,
After Nurse Market. Nurse Market.
After Arti?
Yeah,
sure.
Hare
पंचतत्वा जय पंचतत्वा जय पंचतत्वा जय पंचतत्वा जय पंचतत्वा जय राधा गोविंद राधा गोविंद श्री राधे जय राधा गोविंद Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda K Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakundara Kunkir Govardhana K Vrindavanam Ki Mayapradam Ki Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Translated Book Distribution K ISKCON Ireland K Go Premanande! All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru Gauranga. Haribo. Now we're going to have the Nishingadev first. But I just wanted to let everybody know that does everyone know that we've been trying to buy some land outside Dublin? Everybody know about that? Yeah? You know about that? Well, anyway, we got the bank approval to go ahead and buy the land. So we're getting very, very near. We're very, very near. The last thing, we have to go through all the legal issues and all of that, but that's going to start next week, and it could take a little bit. You know, sometimes these things take a while, but we seem to be on course. So between now and the time that by Krishna's grace, actually, I want everybody to pray extra hard to make sure that we go all the way. Is that okay? Okay, and I just wanted to say that downstairs as well, we're going to have some books. And we have a set of Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj here was talking today for the last 3 days here on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Very, very special book. We have a special edition which contains all 18,000 verses. So we're going to have that downstairs. So if anyone wants to get a copy of that, please come to me. I'll be downstairs. It's a little bit, because there's 18 volumes, it's publishing cost is it's 200 euros. But anyway, we have that, and we have the first set, which is only 5 or 10 euros. So just get started on the Bhagavatam. That's the message for today. Haribol. Okay. Shri Bhagavan Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna.
थोड़ा वो आ गया देख थोड़ा लाइट से आ जाएगा
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed the lecture given by Guru Maharaj, and also the Kirtan and the rest of the bunch. I'm going to ask two questions. The answer to each is, if the answer is correct to each one of them, I will donate the Bhagavad Gita as it is to the person. First, I was told I was asking them too hard question, but I'm going to leave. We spoke about Ashwatthama before. There's one key factor that we missed out about Ashwatthama. Now there was Krishna there, Yudhishthira, Draupadi, Bhima, Arjuna. Who decided that Ashwatthama should not be killed? And why he should not be killed? Who decided he should not be killed and why? Okay, put your hand in the first.
Lots of hands.
Draupadi decided not to kill.
Yes.
And because he was a Brahmana, so that's why he was not killed.
Yes, but one other reason.
Oh, Mataji. Nice.
It was...
Yes?
Because she didn't want his mother to feel the same pain.
Exactly.
Haribo!
The problem now, do I give it to you? But what you left yourself?
One more Bhagavad Gita, Prabhu. Two Bhagavad Gita.
No. What did you? So,
Give it to Mataji.
give it to Mataji. Is that okay?
Haribo!
Okay, you don't, then I'll give you.
Pass it.
She already has.
I can never have enough.
The next question is, name the four dhams and name the direction of the four dhams. Your hand went first. Name the four dhams and the directions.
Rameshwaram in south.
Yes.
Badrinath in upper side of north.
No.
Badrinath is there. That's the one for that. Dwarka, Jagannath Puri.
No, you must give direction.
Jagannath Puri in the east and Dwarka in the west. Rameshwaram in the south. Badrinath in the north.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So thank you everyone for joining. Next we have Prasadam waiting for you downstairs. So it's Govinda's and we'll have just a short kirtan. So some of you, if you want to stay back, you can stay. But we'll recommend everyone, please go and have Prasadam. Hare Krishna.
भाग गए कहाँ है ढूंढे किसके पास है हाँ मैं करता हूँ ठीक है किधर ही
They used to be